Hey everyone, Josh here from JDA Films Productions. I hope you all enjoyed my last review video on my top 10 Stephen King adaptations. It was an absolute blast to make. Now, by now we all know who Stephen King is and how popular his stories are, and we also know how popular a lot of his film adaptations are. A fair few of them actually became absolute smash hits. For example, the remake of the first half of It, which was released in 2017, became one of the highest grossing horror movies ever made. A lot of these great adaptations still remain popular today by passionate fans, including myself. However, tragically, there are the fair few adaptations out there that are absolute stinkers. And I, as a passionate fan of King's works, have endured the absolute horror and terror by watching a fair few of these. Hey, I don't deserve any sympathy whatsoever. I wanted to watch them because I loved the books, so no sympathy deserved. However, I do like my hugs. I think I deserve a hug, don't you think? I don't know, I hope. So, in this review video, through gritted teeth and utter disdain, I will be going through my top 10 worst Stephen King adaptations. So, ladies and gents, brace yourself and join me through this horrific journey, if you dare. Based on the 1979 miniseries, this miniseries remake follows the same story with the novelist Ben Mears, who returns to his childhood hometown, Salem's Lot in Maine. At the same time, an antiques dealer called Richard Straker arrives to run an antique shop with his associate Kurt Barlow. A plague then spreads rapidly through the town, a plague of bloodthirsty vampires. Ben must survive and get to the source of the plague. When this came out on DVD in 2004, I couldn't resist in getting it because I absolutely adore the book and the original film so much. And I also wanted to see what it was like when they added modern touch. This was so close to being great. The story was there, the strong cast were there, but the writing wasn't. One of the many problems was that all the characters, including the main ones, were purely flat. They didn't have the novel's finesse to them. This also didn't help with the changes to some parts of the story, which again could have worked. However, when I mentioned story changes, the writers felt the need to change Richard Straker's character from the book. As I mentioned in my previous review video, his character was different from the book as well. However, this time, this change is just simply awful! Instead of making Straker into someone purely sinister like the book's character, or quite odd and very approachable like the character in the original film, they changed him into an utter buffoon, making him so over the top. He might as well have been a character from the Looney Tunes. He wasn't the least bit scary, he was embarrassingly cringeworthy. Donald Sutherland played the role, and he's usually a fantastic actor. And not only that, the biggest problem with this adaptation is that it lacked one of the most important elements from the novel, which was the pure atmospheric horror. This actually made the film painfully slow, and when it came to the vampiric scenes, they were just meaningless. Okay, yeah, the vampires did look pretty cool, but that's just looks over substance. I might as well have been eating the most amazing looking cookies that are stale. The only positive aspect of this adaptation is Rutger Hauer playing the role of Kurt Barlow. He was actually portrayed really well, and when he showed up, it did perk my interest a little bit, but not enough to carry the film. So yeah, overall, this adaptation of a purely amazing novel was flat and tasteless. I would rather be watching an episode of the Teletubbies over this. So I fully recommend just sticking to the novel and the original miniseries. However, on a positive note, I did read that Salem's Lot is once again being remade, only this time it's being remade into a feature film. It's being written and directed by Gary Dauberman, who was one of the screenwriters of the remake of It. Now that, in my books, is a really, really positive start. It should hopefully be released sometime later on this year, hopefully. So I'll definitely be keeping my eyes out for that one. Aspiring artist Clay Riddell is in Boston, pursuing his dreams of his passion. At one moment, every single person around him at Boston Airport answers a call on their mobiles. Suddenly, they all scream in agonising pain and change into ultra-violent maniacs. This was caused by an electronic signal called the pulse, and it's happened throughout the world. Clay and 2 other survivors must take a journey to Maine to find his wife and son. The book is absolutely amazing, and when I found out it was being made into a film, I couldn't wait to see it. In 2016, it was released in Selectors Cinemas, and when it came out on Blu-ray, I finally bought a copy. And let me just say, I'm not surprised why it had limited releases. What an absolute waste of potential! This could have been a masterpiece of a film. It could have been within my favourite adaptations. It had a solid cast with John Cusack as Clay, Samuel Jackson as his travelling companion, Tom, and Isabelle Fuhrman as Alice, Clay's second travelling companion. They played their parts really well. Now, this may sound really positive so far, but here's the downfall, and I am despairing as I say this. It followed the same fate as the 2004 remake of Salem's Lot. This film was completely tarnished by the absolutely abysmal script writing. It felt so rushed. The story might as well have been on fast forward, not capturing the full essence of the characters. Yeah, the director Todd Williams captured the infected chase scenes well, but with the story being on ludicrous speed, they felt empty. And even the most important elements that were captured from the novel were completely ruined by its outrageous pacing. Now, what truly bothers me the most about this film is its ending. Please excuse the small spoiler alert coming up. The ending of the book was tragic, with a small sense of hope whilst being beautifully heartfelt at the exact same time. The ending of the film did not end like this. It ended painfully corny and purely ridiculous. No! It's about as painful as putting mayonnaise and gherkins in a burger. It's just wrong. Just no! Okay. Calm down. Just chill. Just chill. So yeah, I will not be watching this again anytime soon. I will be avoiding this adaptation like the plague. I actually think it would have worked better as a mini-series. Maybe one day it might be remade into a mini-series. Who knows? A small group of people from different backgrounds who are travelling through the Nevada desert all get captured by a psychopathic sheriff, Collie Indragian. He takes them to a deserted town called Desperation, where dark secrets are hidden. This was another miniseries that I was really looking forward to because I thoroughly enjoyed the book. Surprise, surprise. And to be honest, the first and second half of the miniseries weren't too bad. The story was there and it kept very close to the book. The acting was okay, not brilliant, but just about bearable. The best actor of the cast was Ron Perlman, who played Indragian. He did the role justice. Right now you must all be thinking, well, why did you put this in your top 10 worst? It doesn't sound too bad. Well, allow me to tell you. It was the horrendously, whimsically cheesy ending. The climax of the book was brutal and purely epic. It kept me glued to the pages, and I felt like I couldn't put the book down. The film, however, completely watered it down and changed it to a version that might as well have been produced from Wish.com. It completely ruined the whole film for me. This was directed by Mick Garris. He's directed quite a few of King's adaptations. For example, the original miniseries of The Stand in 1994, which I love, and the miniseries remake of The Shining in 1997. I liked it, a few problems here and there, but I liked it. But the one thing that these adaptations I've just mentioned have in common are the endings. They're all way too watered down and corny. Whereas with Desperation, it went way too far. So I'll just be sticking to the novel, which I highly recommend. It's amazing. A boy called Jake is haunted by visions of an evil warlock known as the Man in Black, hell-bent on destroying a tower that connects all universal realms. Jake discovers a high-tech portal that takes him to an alternate universe called Midworld, where he travels with a gunslinger called Roland, whose quest is to stop the Man in Black's evil scheme. The Dark Tower is a series of 8 books. The titles are The Gunslinger, The Drawing of the Three, The Wastelands, Wizard and Glass, Walls of the Calla, Song of Susanna, The Dark Tower, and The Wind Through the Keyhole. As you can probably tell, these books sound really different from King's other ones. The genres of the series are science fiction and fantasy blended in together. Admittedly, I've only read the first book. I really did like it, but it was really hard for me to get into because King uses a different style of writing in them. One day I'll definitely read the rest of them, because I've heard nothing but amazing things about them. I've also read how difficult it's been to adapt them to screen. So with the movie industry's infinite wisdom, they decided to make a 95-minute long feature film. Now I know for a fact, and purely by research, that the world of the Dark Tower is humongous. I even got that from reading the first book. And this adaptation is an example on not how to adapt a book to the big screen. The screenwriters literally crammed in all 8 books into one film, totally minimising the size of the multiverse, the depth of the stories, and the characters. Talk about studio pressures, eh? I mean, I even felt that when watching it. I've even read that so many fans of the series were really disappointed, including King himself. With the really strong cast, especially Idris Elba who plays Roland, the series could have been stretched out to at least 7 or 8 films. Seriously, the makers of this film really did miss out on something huge here, which is so disappointing. However, on a positive note about the Dark Tower series, I did read that they are being adapted into a TV series. It's being written and produced by, in my eyes, the master of King adaptations, Mike Flanagan, who wrote and directed the incredible films of Doctor Sleep and Gerald's Game, both which I mentioned in my previous review video. Mike Flanagan is a huge fan of Stephen King's books. I did read that The Dark Tower is a dream project of his that he's been working on for such a long time. Now he's been finally given the chance to bring it to TV screens. This I think he'll handle beautifully. I cannot wait to see it when it's released. This 1993 two-part miniseries is based in a small town called Haven, where one of the main characters, Roberta Bobby Anderson, and her dog stumble upon a buried object in the woods. As she uncovers it, her personality becomes dangerously different, and so do all the townsfolk who help her uncover it. Bobby and the other main character, Jim Gardner, find out that the buried object is a spaceship where the inhabitants are invading the town in very mysterious ways. Here we have another science fiction story written by the Master of Macabre, and it sounds like an awesome story, right? Now, I did mention in my previous review video that I do not find it an issue whatsoever if you watch the films before reading the books or the other way around, and I still keep to that statement today. However, with this adaptation, please, 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 I beg you, I just simply beg you, please stick to the novel and avoid this travesty. Yet again, the story is right there and it's followed really well, but that core is completely ruined by the abysmal acting from the cast. It just seemed that most of the cast were picked out of a hat. Okay, the actor of Jim Gardner, Jimmy Smith, wasn't too bad, but it wasn't enough to save the film. So yeah, there's another miniseries that fell face first to the floor. I'd even choose to watch an episode of Goosebumps over this, and actually, that's a good idea. I actually might watch an episode one day. Hey, don't judge me, okay? It was my first step towards horror. I know it's terrible, but it still holds dear to my heart. A married couple called Andrew and Vicky McGee both gained certain telepathic abilities via a drug experiment from the government. They have a daughter called Charlie who has the ability to start fires with her mind. The government takes an interest in Charlie and operates from a top secret department called The Shop, who want to quarantine Charlie and study her. This was one of Drew Barrymore's first ever films that brought her onto the spotlight, and let me just say, thank God she started off her career with a better film, which was E.T. in 1982. This was, yet again, another film which had the story, but certainly not the cast. Even the awesome actor, George C. Scott, couldn't save us from this disaster. Okay, right, I'm taking Drew Barrymore out of the equation. She was okay, she certainly did try her best. Unlike her so-called castmates, who I imagined their last acting roles were from their school plays when they were kids. Oh, come on, producers, you had the opportunity there and you totally mucked it up. You could have done so much of a better job than that. I mean, Stephen King hated this film more than The Shining, and that is saying something. Oh God, we're coming up to number 4 now. Oh, I need a milkshake to calm me down. Based on the novella, which was in the novella collection book 4 Past Midnight, the story focuses on a group of people on a plane who all fall asleep and wake up to the rest of the plane completely empty. The remaining passengers land at an airport where there's no one in sight. They soon find out that they've flown through an aurora borealis, through a time rip between the past and the present reality. They then find that evil creatures called the Langoliers, who consume all matter, are on their way. Now, if that sounded really confusing, please excuse me. That might have been a really awful way to explain the plot. It's actually really complex, and I have to say, it's not my favourite King story. Don't get me wrong, it's still good, but the TV adaptation of it certainly isn't. Yet again, it followed the same fate as a few of the other adaptations I mentioned previously. Except, this time, the acting is even worse, and so are the special effects. I mean, seriously, these are the Langoliers? Are you joking me? Are you actually serious? I'd be happy if they were the size of Godzilla, and I'd even be happy if they were killer sharks in a tornado. But no, we get badly CGI'd crap pellets that came out of an Ewok from Return of the Jedi. I mean, I know back then TV films weren't taken as seriously and they didn't have the budgets like they do today, but seriously, this is beyond a joke! And not only are we dealing with terrible acting and laughable effects, we're dealing with a painfully slow story. It actually runs for 3 hours, whereas if the problems were improved, it would have been more tolerable, and I usually love slow-paced long stories. But 3 hours of a terrible movie, it might as well have been 3 days long. And for an extra slap in the face on how bad this adaptation is, the producers had the audacity to add this as their final shot. Two orphans called Eli and Josh are taken to Chicago by their foster parents. They're both connected with the children's cult who killed all the adults in Gatlin, Nebraska, under the influence of a demon within the cornfields called He Who Walks Behind the Rows. Eli has evil intentions of recreating those events that happened in Gatlin. The first film was made in 1984. It does have a hell of a lot of problems, but yet I still can't help but like it. The second one was pretty terrible, but this one, oh dear. Not only is the story utterly pointless and ludicrous, the acting is beyond bad and the script is laughable. I haven't watched this in years, and when I think about it today, it still traumatises me. But the one element that has been embedded into my brain like a parasite is how awful the main child, Eli, was. The main evil child from the first film, Isaac, did look pretty evil, until he starts getting angry and started sounding like Eric Cartman out of South Park. But this main evil child, Eli, looked as threatening as a daffodil. And not only did he not look the part, he was obnoxiously annoying. When trying to manipulate the children in Chicago, he mostly shouted out his lines, sounding like he was having a paddy. Seriously, I wanted to strangle him. And when it came to the demon He Who Walks Behind the Rose, he was hardly ever shown in the first two films. But with Hollywood's main sequel rule, which is make everything bigger, of course he had to be shown in this one in full detail. Seriously, we were meant to be scared by this? So, yeah, believe it or not, that's a film which I highly recommend to steer clear from. But on a positive note, what I also recommend is to read the short story collection book called Night Shift. That's where you'll find Children of the Corn, which the first film was based on. It is awesome, it is so atmospheric and creepy, and there are no sequels or spin-offs to it, which makes this adaptation even more pointless. An overweight, arrogant lawyer called Billy Halleck accidentally runs over an old woman whilst driving carelessly. After being cleared by the courts, an old man approaches him, touches him gently on the cheek, and angrily says the word thinner. That old man is the dead woman's father. Weeks later, Billy dramatically loses weight and is continuing to do so. The old man has cursed him, and Billy must find a way to get to the old man and break the curse. Admittedly, I was a teenager when I read the book's plot. I felt at the time that there was something missing. I felt it didn't sound powerful. But curiosity killed the cat. I got a copy, read it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I regret thinking those negative thoughts. So, of course, I had to watch the film afterwards. Once again, we're dealing with another abysmal cast. Robert John Burke, who plays Billy, has to be one of the worst actors I've ever seen on screen. He's literally up there with Tommy Wiseau. Maybe not to that level, but still bad enough. And even the rest of the cast couldn't act to save their lives. Even Joe Mantegna was terrible, and he usually isn't. He played the part as Detective David Rossi from the TV show Criminal Minds, and he was brilliant in that. So, this purely shows that not only the cast was bad, so was the direction. It literally felt, whilst the film was being edited, that the director chose just the bad takes to put in the final cut. The director, Tom Holland, also directed the miniseries of The Langoliers. I mean, seriously, dude, have you not learnt from the mistakes that were made on The Langoliers? I mean, come on, you could have done a much better job than that. I mean, well done for Fright Night. That was an incredible film. But seriously! So yeah, that adaptation fails on every single level. But now... oh no. Okay, everyone. This is it. The big one. The abomination of all film adaptations. I don't think I can do this. Okay, no. Okay, just chill. Just think of the amazing remake. Just think of the incredible remake. An evil shape-shifting clown called Pennywise lives in the sewers of Derry, Maine, and is preying on children. A small group of child outcasts called the Losers Club stand together to fight Pennywise. 27 years later, the adult Losers Club find out that the evil clown didn't die and has returned. The losers must go back to Derry to fight him once again. Okay, now before I tear this apart, I do know that this miniseries gained a massive cult following, so I do not mean any disrespect towards fans whatsoever. I also know that rules for TV films and TV shows were very different back in 1990. But If there were so many rules, why didn't the producers make this into a feature film? I know the book is massive, so, better yet, why didn't they make this into 2 feature films? They missed out on making a masterpiece here. Yes, it does follow the story of the book very well, but, again, the cast were atrocious! And, as you may have noticed, throughout this list of bad adaptations, I kept mentioning how badly acted these films are. It seems to me that back in the early 80s to the mid-2000s, it was some sort of trend with making these adaptations. It seems that the producers were just so desperate to get these stories onto the screens purely because of how amazing they are. And I totally understand that. But I wish they could have slowed down and really knew what they were doing with them. I mean, yes, I know the child actors were just children and they were trying their best. But the adult actors literally had no excuse. They were just as bad. Bad to a point where it was laughable. And now for Ronald McDonald. Pennywise. I did briefly mention about my thoughts on him in my previous video. In the book, Pennywise is sinister, slimy, and purely evil. And with this god-awful script, he was made into an annoying, over-the-top, bombastic cretin. I know a lot of you out there will highly disagree with my views on this, and I totally understand that, because this may have been your very first horror film you watched when you were young, and it still holds dear to you. And I truly understand that, because that's how much the book means to me. It's one of my all-time favourites, and I'll never forget first reading it when I was 16 and being utterly mesmerised by it. With this adaptation, I felt purely cheated. Not only with the bad cast, but also because of how watered down and cheap the amazing story felt. Even down to the scare scenes, it just descended into the dirt. When this was in the early stages of production, the director of Night of the Living Dead, George Romero, was asked to direct this. Then, the TV production company, Lorimer Television, felt that he would make it too horrific for network standards. He originally wrote the script as a 10-hour series. Lorimer didn't agree with this either, so they constantly asked him to cut it down until it reached the 3-hour mark. Romero did not agree with this, and he walked out of the project. The other reason why Romero walked out of the project was due to scheduling conflicts with the production of the remake of Night of the Living Dead, which was a really good remake, so I do recommend both versions of that film. Anyway, back to this mess. When watching this miniseries, I could actually tell how much the script was cut, because when it came to the climax of the film, where Pennywise shows his true form, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and it looks outrageously silly. In the book, it made sense about Pennywise's true form. It does get very hippy-trippy, but it still makes sense. At least the screenwriter, Larry Cohen, could have done was put more detail of that in the film. Even the director, Tommy Lee Wallace, was very disappointed with this element. I can also tell that Lorimer interfered deeply with the whole film because they also made it excruciatingly cheesy. The story is not cheesy. Far from it, in fact. It's extremely dark, epic, and heartfelt. Yes, the miniseries did show a little bit of that, but so very badly. If I wanted cheese, I would have watched an awesome 80s action film. Trust me, they are better than this. To me, it was a film made at the wrong time. The remake, in my opinion, is the true version. Well, that journey was certainly very painful, but all joking aside, it was great fun. On a much lighter note, as much as these adaptations are bad, the books are certainly not. I, yet again, fully recommend each and every one of them. They are all absolutely fantastic. So, I hope you all enjoyed my ranting and raving like an absolute lunatic in this video. Take care, and I'll see you all very soon. Okay, I got quite a lot to read here, so I might get this wrong, so brace yourself, peeps. When this came out on DVD in 2004, I couldn't resist in getting it because of as I mentioned in my and I couldn't wait for the film to come out when I found out in 2016 it was released. This film was once again, I can't remember it being made first. Oh, I got quite a lot to read here on screen, so brace yourself. This is another mini-series that I was really looking forward to. Never mind. Try again. Surprise, surprise. And well, where am I? I have no idea. I really have no idea. And to start off with, the mini-series... Damn it. This was another mini-series that I was really looking forward to because I thoroughly enjoyed getting my lines right to begin with. A boy called Jake is haunted by visions of an evil... The Dark Tower is a series of 8 books, and the titles are The Gunslinger, The Drawing of the Three, The Wastelands, Wizard and Glass, Walls of the Colour, Song of Susanna, The yeah, it's the last book. It's called Recommend to read it. It's amazing. Admittedly, I've only read the first book, and I did really like it, but it was actually really hard to get into. Damn it. As you can probably tell, these books sound really different from King's other ones. Never mind. Now I know for a fact, and purely by research, on how humongous the world On a positive note about the Dark Tower series, I did read that seriously, the makers of this film really did miss something huge here. They really did. Seriously, the makers of this film really did miss out on something huge. Damn it. It's being written and produced by, in my eyes, excuse me. The government takes an interest in Charlie and operates from a top secret department called the Shop. Let me just say, thank God she started off her cricket. This was one of Drew Barrymore's first ever films that brought her on. I'm sure we can. God, I can't even speak. Unlike her so-called castmates, who I imagine their last acting roles were back in their school days in their school productions. Honestly, I forgot my line. Unlike her so-called castmates, who I can imagine their last acting days were back in their school days in a group of people on a plane, whom all fall asleep and wake up to the rest of the plane. The end. They soon find out that they've flown through an aurora borealis. That's a hard word to pronounce. Aurora borealis. Oh my God, it might as well have been 3 days long. And see, it's that bad. It's making me cough. Foster parents. They both are they're connected. And again, I haven't watched this in years, and when I think about it today, it still traumatises me. And the one element that has been embedded into my brain like a parasite is how awful the main child Eli was. God damn it, there goes a light. After being cleared by the courts, an old man let me try that all again, that sounded awful. And I felt it sounded like there was something missing. I think I got my lines wrong again. God. Got a bad brain. Uh-oh. So if it comes out while I'm speaking, please excuse me. Like so. There we go. That won't be in the final cut, by the way. So this really shows that not only the cast was terrible, and so were my words. How long have we been recording? But if there were so many rules, why not make it into a feature film? Or get my lines right, trend with making these adaptations. Yeah, okay, alright, cool. Forgot my lines already. No, well, never mind. La 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 la, preparation. Is that sounded like this? some sort of trend with making the I'll get there at one point. I need someone behind the camera to hold the script and literally do this. But then again, if that happened, I'd just be doing this. So basically, I do. It would look a bit weird, wouldn't it? These onto screens because of how purely amazing these stories are. I forgot. Okay, now, I know a lot of you out there will highly disagree with my views on this. And I disagree on my life, that's what I disagree on. And I really do understand that feeling, because that's how much the book means to me. I'll never forget first reading it when I was 16 and being loving it. That'll do. Even down to the stair scenes? Fuck. Romero didn't agree with this either, so he walked out of the project. And it was also... When watching this miniseries, I could actually tell on how much the script was cut, because I forgot my lines. At least the screenwriter Larry Cohen could have done was put a little bit more detail of that in the